Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Excelcast. I'm your host, Joe Parker, and today I have Zach again. Zach, how you doing, man? It was a pleasure having you on last time. How have you been since then?
I'm doing great, and appreciate you having me on again. I guess you could say I'm a friend of the show now. Might have to get a real microphone at some point. I listened back a little bit. I was just like, my audio didn't sound nearly as good as Joe's, but
No, it's it all comes with actually having a podcast. You got to get the right equipment. You got to be diligent about, planning out and getting what you need to get. So anyway, we had a lot of different answers on our polls, or our poll rather, from the last episode. A lot of people wanted to know about general training tips that you had, also a little bit about, how to build muscle and things like that. So if you just want to start out by telling us how anyone can approach training to build muscle in a sustainable way.
yeah. So what I love about hypertrophy training, which that's just the scientific word for building muscle, getting bigger. Um, there's a bunch of different ways to go about it. There's tons of ways to skin a cat. Um, but I can think of two things that need to be present in every single hypertrophy program, however you go about it. And that's one, it is proximity to failure. So how close you get to local muscular failure. And then in saying that, two, is that you just need to use technique that makes the muscle you're looking to target the limiting factor of the exercise. So if I get done with a set of 10 on squats and I'm looking to target my quads, bias my quads, because that's a big compound exercise. You're hitting a bunch of muscles that are aside from your quads. I want to be, when I finish the set, I want it to be because that my quads gave out over everything else. So um, I don't want it to be because another muscle group, say like glutes, give out, or say other systems like cardiovascular system. If I finish a set, I don't want it to be because like I'm winded. And then like if I were to ask myself, what kept you from being able to continue with that set, I want it to be because the quads gave out. So that's just an example. So those two things, as long as you have those present, you're doing a lot of good if your goal is to build muscle hypertrophy. And then on top of that, if I had to give some parameters, when we're talking about, how many sets a week should I be doing, or rep ranges, stuff like that. Generally, it's a big range because there's so much variance depending on like somebody's training age, like how new they are to it or how advanced they are. Say like 6 to 20 sets per week per muscle group is generally where you'll find yourself. If you're more of a beginner intermediate, you actually might need more sets than somebody who's advanced because, you aren't as efficient with technique and you aren't as, the technique is a skill in itself. Being able to push yourself to muscular failure, which is, I say it as if it's an easy thing to do and it's just something you do every set, but it's very difficult, but so so if you don't have those skills, you might need more sets in order to get the amount of effective reps needed to build muscle. When I say effective reps, I'm talking about like those last 5 reps of a set. So if I'm going for a set of 15 on bicep curls, those last 5-ish reps where you see like the rep speed really start to slow down, that's when the biceps are experiencing the highest degrees of mechanical tension. And that's just the force that they experience during the exercise. Those are the 5 reps when, all my muscle fibers are being recruited, being taxed. Those are the ones that really matter. Those first 10 are just to get me to that point. So theoretically, you could do a set of just 5 and you could get the job done. The thing is, you have to be really skilled to do that. So, that's why beginners and intermediates might need, say, like, they might need 10 sets of chest on one day because they aren't as efficient with their work. But somebody such as myself or anybody who's kind of advanced, they can get the same job done in, say, 4 or 5 sets. So it's really variable. It's not like this black and white thing that not everyone can run the same program because a lot of people just have different needs. So we talked. Go ahead.
Yeah, like because when you're experienced, you know where your numbers are at. I've noticed recently that I've been more of I know where I can start at, and not so much like I know where I could start at in the past, but it was lighter, a lot lighter than it is now, and it was less accurate. Like say I was bench pressing, I would start with like 185. Now I'm starting with like 200 because even though it doesn't seem like a crazy jump, but if you're starting with 15 more pounds, it's a more accurate start point for you to start with your sets and with your reps.
Yeah. And you mean like 205, like that's your working set, or like you walk into the gym and you throw 205 on the bar, like you start warming up?
I start warming up with 205, but I
Yeah. So like
do
that's
yeah, but I do like 6 to 5 reps per set. That's like my range.
yeah. And so like when I say 6 to 20, I don't remember if I said working sets or not, but I mean like working sets, 6 to 20
Yeah,
working sets. So that's not including, you know, the few warm up sets you have leading up to it. And typically, like when I do it, I'm leading up to a top weight, and then each set after that, you're gonna see, if you really are. This is how you know if you're getting yourself close to that failure point, is if you start to see a drop off in either the reps you're able to do at the same weight, or if you're working in a desired rep range, you might have to drop the weight to stay in that rep range. So a chest day, say for example, I go in and I do a chest press machine, and I want to stay in the 8 to 15 rep range. My first top set, it might be 100 pounds for 12 reps. Set two, it might drop down to 100 pounds for 8 reps. I'm at the bottom of my rep range now. I have one more set I need to do. So now I have to lower the weight to get back in that rep range. That's sort of that's how it'll look when you are really getting close to local muscular failure, getting the highest degrees of mechanical tension you can, recruiting the largest muscle fibers. And the reason why that also happens is that the largest muscle fibers, they're capable of producing a lot of force. These are the biggest fibers you have, but the trade-off is they fatigue really quickly. So that's why you see that rapid drop off in performance. If you're going in and you're doing, 5 sets of 15, same weight on the same exercise, you're probably leaving some in the tank.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I've been doing like 4 to 6 rep ranges specifically, and I don't know. Do you practice like upper limit and lower limit? Like if you hit your upper limit, then you go up 5 pounds. If you hit your lower limit, you drop 5 pounds. If you hit five, like the middle, you stay there. Has that been something that you practiced at all?
Over like the short term, like in the same workout, or long term?
I mean, I only did it today. Actually, I just read up on it a little bit before the podcast, actually. So I just tried it today and it felt good because every time I would hit 6, I would go up 5. And it kind of put me on this like steady increase. And I got to a point where I would hit 5 reps and I was like, okay, like I'm good here.
Yeah. So like that's like kind of a micro version of working up to a top weight.
Yeah.
So I guess, so if you're somebody who's trying to figure out where you fall, like with a certain weight, and you're trying to hit a desired rep range, that's what you would do. But once you do that once, you know where you're at for each workout following that. So
Okay.
next time you go in, say you did that method and then you ended up getting to, I'm just throwing out an example, you got to 200 pounds on bench press for 5 reps. That's your target for next workout.
Mm.
And then, but the thing is, next workout that might end up being 6, which is fine. That's progressive overload. And then, so now so we'll get to progressive overload now. Workout to workout, it's just a matter of beating your numbers. So if you're hitting 200 pounds for 5 reps, one workout, next workout, you need to hit 6.
Mm.
That is what causes your body to adapt each week to that training stimulus, and it tells it that it needs to keep building more muscle. So that's why it's important to track all your training variables, the exercises you do each week, how many sets, weight, reps, all of it, because that's your measuring stick for muscle growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we also wanted to talk about, especially when it comes to tracking your training, why are you training and why are you doing the training that you're doing?
Yeah. So when you have a program set up, you can either have trainer, coach set it up. They'll take all these variables into consideration, or when you're doing it yourself, you need to have a reason for basically everything in your program. You need to have a reason for how many days a week you're training, the exercises you're choosing, and what order in the workout they fall. So I'm going to try and give a case that encapsulates a lot of that. So I'm trying to prioritize my quads. So on a leg day, I would want them to be earlier in my workout when my quality of work is highest. Quads take a little bit, like legs take a little bit more time to recover as far as number of days goes between workouts. So if I'm hitting my quads on Monday, probably want to wait till Friday to hit them again. So that's a reason for the split. So like my frequency, this is how many days I have between my leg workout. So I hit them on Friday, but Monday comes around a lot quicker in that weekly split. So Friday, still going to do the same thing, but it's not going to be as many working sets, because then, I'm going to be sore through Tuesday if I try and do the same thing I did Monday, So like that's the rationale, is for, when you're setting up your weekly split, how many sets per muscle group am I doing? Where am I going to allocate it so that I can recover before each following workout to make sure that I can still progressively overload each workout? You don't want to hit chest Tuesday, have it planned for Friday, and you're walking and you're like, I'm still a little disrupted in my chest for Monday. That's how you did a little too much. And if you're tracking your training, you're tracking the amount of sets you did Monday, what to pull out of that so that you're good for next week, that you can hit chest on Tuesday and Friday. That's why it's all important. If it's not, you're just kind of going into the gym, pissing into the wind, and you're hoping that things happen. But if you track everything, you can actually see the progression, the trends of everything over time. You're doing something right. You're building muscle. Or like exercise selection, that's the thing with bodybuilding. There's a lot of variability. There's a lot of different exercises you can do. It's not just like powerlifting where it's squat, bench, deadlift, where you have to do those lifts. If I say I don't feel my quads as much or I can't use a technique for barbell back squats per se. Barbell back squats is a highly skilled exercise, and there's not a lot of external stability. So what I mean by that is it's a totally free weight exercise. All the stability has to be created by the rest of your body, which you can make a barbell back squat work if your goal is quad hypertrophy, but it just requires a ton of skill. A lot of skill, a lot of effort, a lot of extra fatigue from other systems of your body. So that's why, if I'm somebody who struggles with that, I'm going to choose maybe a machine squat, a leg press, something where I can get my desired outcome a lot easier. So those are a couple examples, what I'm rolling through in my head when I'm going through and laying out a program, what's dictating my decision.
Okay. Yeah. Would you give anyone different ways of going about lifting when it comes to big lifts like compound lifts, bench press, deadlift, squat, and then I don't even know what to call them, ancillary muscle groups like biceps, triceps? Is there a different approach that you use when it comes to the different muscle groups?
Generally, no. But, that's, how do I explain it? It's very much a case by case basis. So,
Okay.
I might have a taller client, somebody with really long femurs. Squatting is going to be a lot harder for them compared to, say, a shorter person with better leverages. So exercise selection with that person might require a little bit of extra thought. Some people, they can make every exercise work because they might be built to do every exercise, or at least most exercises. Some people, you got to kind of think outside the box. So like, and it could also depend on like the gym setup, what people have available to them. If I have a tall client and, maybe all they have accessible to them is a squat rack and a leg press, it's going to take time and effort for them to get used to squatting, but, somebody has to make it work. They definitely can. It might just take more time. So like, I might put them on heel elevation so that they can get a deeper squat. So little stuff like that. But I think when you asked the question, you started it with, big lifts, big compound lifts like bench squat, deadlift, and if it's different from, hitting smaller muscle groups, I guess on like the limbs basically you were talking about. And that's what's great about it. You don't need to there's no required lifts when it comes to building muscle, bodybuilding. You can make just about anything work. There's nothing that you have to do. And it's more, and it all just comes back down to the first two things I said is, can you perform the exercise in a way that makes the target muscle the limiting factor of the exercise? And can you push yourself to local muscular failure using it? If you can do both those things, you're good. There's nothing else to worry about. The only time I treat them differently is maybe rep ranges, like squats or deadlifts. They're global total body exercises. They're super fatiguing. So, I'm sure you've done this in, the football weight room, high rep squat challenges.
Yeah.
Those kill you.
Yeah.
So a 20 rep max on barbell back squats isn't the same thing as a 20 rep max on bicep curls. So those are things to keep in mind. If I have barbell back squats planned at the beginning of somebody's workout and I I prescribe a 20 rep set, they're going to need a lot of recovery time before they carry out the rest of the workout, or if they can. So that also, there would be a solution. I would just put the back squats at the end if I know I want somebody to do something like that, so that it's not impacting their performance on exercises following that.
Yeah, see, I personally, I don't want to say that I can't do that, but I really try not to do that. As soon as I get in the gym, if it's leg day, I'm heading directly to the squat rack right away. I just need to get it out of the way. I do squats, and then I do like a lighter version of deadlifts just to hit my hamstrings. And then, yeah, I have to do it because if I start doing, I usually do shoulders and legs on the same split day. And if I start doing shoulders or something, I'm like, I really don't have to do legs. Like, let me just do some leg extensions. I'll be all right. So I have to immediately get to the squat rack, just to break through that, that soft voice. It's like, oh no, you're fine. Like you ran today. You don't need to go squat, things like that. So, me personally, it definitely has to be immediately.
That's interesting because I get the frame of thought too. Like,
Yeah.
when you have the bigger lifts programmed, when you get in the gym, you want to get to the big shit right away. You want to get to the hard stuff, get out of the way. But what I found in the last couple of years, because I used to train that way too. It's like bigger lifts and then slowly do, the smaller, less fatigue demanding exercises as I go on. But I found that starting with those, so if you were to do shoulders first, it's not going to impact your performance on legs, like squats, deadlifts, those exercises. But if you were to do those exercises first before shoulders, squats and deadlifts, that might actually bleed over into your shoulder performance. So that's something that I have changed a lot in my training, is kind of looking at the possible ways fatigue might occur with movements and how it can affect everything else. And that can dictate the order of my exercise selection too. So like within a leg workout, an example is maybe doing your, say, seated hamstring curls. That's not going to, if you do that before squats, that's not going to affect your squat performance because it's not as fatiguing on the central nervous system, cardiovascular system. But you do squats before hamstrings, or squats before hamstring curls, might be a different story. You might develop a lot more fatigue in your sets of squats before heading into hamstring curls. That can have a negative impact. So I know, like, egotistically, you want to get to those bigger lifts first, but if you can just hold off, do shoulders first, do what you need to do, get to squats and deadlifts, you might actually see more performance across the board, or increased performance across the board.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's egotistic. I think it's like, I just, if I start doing other things, I'm going to think about ways to talk myself out of doing squats, because it is a central nervous system, cardiovascular, taxing exercise. So my mind just, I start going, oh, well, you ran this morning. Oh, well, you're working out now. You're going to do core. You ran a little bit when you first got here, things like that. And it just all starts creeping in. So I feel like if I just face it and directly attack it, it just, it's better for me mentally. But it's funny that physically it may not be best for me. So I wonder why mentally it's better for me, but physically it's more fatiguing and more demanding. I don't know. Have you ever experienced a client that's like, no, I have to get my big like lifts out of the way first, or they just straight up listen to, what you're saying?
I haven't had any clients like question that. I just know from personal experience, like that's been me.
Yeah.
But so this is diligence part two, right? If say you're tracking your training, you're logbooking, you have the workout in front of you, your numbers from last week that you need to beat, you need to do it in this order. You might feel a certain way, but once you have that book staring at you in the face, you're going to do what you need to do. So that's, another reason to have a logbook or whatever method of tracking your training, and, mentally your mental state affects your performance in the gym. Like you said, you already ran that day, or maybe you had a long day at work. You start to talk yourself out of stuff. And naturally, we just want to make things easier for ourselves subconsciously, whether or not you realize it. So by having, metrics, your training metrics to actually dictate your way of doing things and performance in the gym, that's another reason to do it.
Yeah.
Keeps you diligent.
Yeah, because those numbers don't lie.
No, they don't.
Yeah. So that's another key importance of tracking, is because not only are you actually seeing those numbers, but it's also keeping you accountable on paper to the point where you don't, thankfully I haven't talked myself out of squatting since I've been back into squatting. There was a point in time where I did listen to, a lot of people were like, oh, dude, you run what, 3 to 5 miles a day? Like, you don't need to squat. Like that is your leg day, but now I'm like, but what if I squatted too? How would that, mentally, how would that push me to go even further in whatever else I do? So I'm glad that now I've taken up squatting, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Or like if you say you have a workout planned on a day where you don't run before it, you can make that the day where you squat and deadlift. You'll also see increased performance in that way. And on the days where you do run, in place of what your original workout routine was, where you had squats on the same days that you run, you kind of remove that decision fatigue, that mental fatigue. When it's a real thing. Like decision fatigue is a real thing. When you're kind of, if you go about your day without an organized, regimented, scheduled out blocks for whatever, that process of making all these decisions, running out these scenarios in your head, that all kind of adds up fatigue wise. Whereas if you have everything written out, it removes the need for all that. So yeah, that could be a possible solution for you.
I'm writing that down right now. Because I'd never thought about it like that, right? I've never thought about it as all the decisions that I make throughout the day. Oh, when are you going to go to the gym? When are these things going to happen? What meals are you going to make? Maybe not necessarily that deep, but maybe that deep. What I'm going to eat, how much water am I going to drink? If I just schedule all that out, it would make for a less fatiguing day, because it's like, well, nope, everything's actually already set for you. All you have to do is actually do it, and that's it. I never thought about it like that. I always thought about, I don't know.
Yeah, it's also a very big thing when you're talking about like tracking nutrition too. Like, what meals am I going to eat? That's why for the last full year, I've eaten the same exact meals every day. It might just be in a different order here and there, but it's the same exact meals. And it's because, well, one, I just like the diet that I have now, but also it saves me the decision fatigue of, say, if I were doing an if it fits your macros diet, where it's like, okay, I'm just gonna eat whatever throughout the day and just like calculate it as I go to make it fit my macros. That that requires a lot of extra thought when I just do it. I just eat the same stuff every day to keep it simple. I don't have to think about it because, not every day looks the same as far as like what I'm physically doing throughout the day. So if I can minimize fatigue in one area so that I can stay sharp in others, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. For a while, I was tracking my own protein, like in my notes app on my phone. Every time I would have protein, I would like add it to whatever number. My calories, I calculate on my calculator on my phone, things like that. I stopped doing the protein though, just because it was a little too much. I'm already doing my calories. I know I'm eating egg whites, protein shakes, chicken, rice. At night I'll have protein ice cream, things like that. Well, not protein ice cream, but there's a lot of protein in it. It's like, I don't know, 12 to 19 grams of protein per pint. So, I understand. I know that I'm getting a good enough amount of protein in it. But, specifically, I know you wanted to talk about getting that protein intake in. So, what are some concrete recommendations that you would give to someone who's just trying to maintain a healthy build? What should their protein intake be?
Yeah, I'm going to get into that. Just one thing on the tracking, and like you use yourself as an example, tracking protein. I'm able to do that just because I've been doing this for a very long time and I have a good handle on what my numbers are and, where they need to be. If you're, if you want to get into this and, you need to find out what your numbers are. So you're going to need to go through periods where you are kind of tracking on a day by day basis. You don't have to focus on everything. You could just focus on protein because, protein I think is very important and a lot of people are under consuming it. So, when I have a consultation at the gym, I'll give like a 70% of the time. This is when I ask for a diet recall, like what somebody's typical day of eating. It goes like this. It's like I wake up before I leave the house, go to work, I grab a couple pieces of lunch. I have a salad, might throw a couple hard boiled eggs on it or like a handful of chicken. And then for dinner, I'll have like a meat protein source and then like a good starchy carb source like potatoes, rice, whatever. That's good. But when you look at the course of the day, I go through and kind of eyeball it up as far as the amount of protein goes, and it's like 30 to 40 grams, and you're a 220-pound guy.
Yeah.
So the recommended daily intake for protein for general population is 0.8 to 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. So a 220-pound guy, that's 100 kilogram body weight, right? So which means the lower end of that range is 80 grams of protein, and this person's eating half of that. So they're very deficient in protein. And protein is huge for, if you're somebody looking to build muscle, lose body fat, it's huge for metabolism purposes in several different ways. One, out of protein, carbs, and fats, protein has the highest thermic effect, meaning your body burns the most amount of calories digesting protein out of those three. Second one is, of course, protein builds a lot of muscle if you're training correctly, right? Having more muscle in your frame increases your basal metabolic rate, which is the largest portion of your total daily energy expenditure. So you're boosting your metabolism basically when you're building muscle over time. That's why you see, 250-pound bodybuilders slamming 5,000 calories a day and they're still lean. It's because they have an extremely high metabolism from that muscle tissue. And three, like hormones having to do with a lot of metabolic processes, like thyroid, testosterone, estrogen. Your body uses amino acids to produce those hormones. So amino acids are just like the simplest form of protein, broken down protein. So when you look at all those three things and you see the 220-pound guy eating 30, 40 grams of protein a day, that is the easiest fix as far as getting them to start to bring up their metabolism over time. And there's tons of other benefits like, bone health, when you're talking about skin, nails, hair, all that stuff. Protein's used for like literally everything in the body. It's lifeblood for us basically. So when I get a client and it's like that's what their diet typically looks like, that's like my first goal is just to get them to look at protein, find ways to get more protein throughout the day. And I'm like, sure, on paper, I could have them try and optimize everything else, but protein being the biggest thing, I'm not trying to throw the whole kitchen window at them. I'm going to be looking at that, and kind of everything else will follow.
Yeah.
And if you're somebody who also struggles with fat loss, or maybe, you know, eating less calories, feeling satiated, protein is very satiating as well. So if you're somebody looking to lose fat, definitely look at increasing the protein in your daily intake.
Yeah. So is it typical that your clients start off by doing protein shakes, or did they start off just incorporating it in their diet in another fashion?
I try and do mostly whole food sources, but I also go for whatever's convenient. Like, I don't expect everyone to have, pre-cooked meals for every meal like I do. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So I'm looking for convenient ways to do it. One way, protein powder is a good way.
No
Maybe
pun.
like Greek, yeah, no pun intended. It's literally what it is.
Yeah.
Something like Greek yogurt. That's literally, you don't have to spend any time preparing it. It's already there. You're looking at 25 grams for 2 servings of it. That's something you could do as a really quick breakfast. That's usually like my first go-to if I have somebody who has to be at work early in the morning.
Mm.
One really good strategy too is, because usually people are good with the dinner portion, I usually just say cook extra for dinner, more than you need, and then that's whatever leftover meat you have, throw that in, say, your lunch for the next day. So now with the dinner, breakfast, lunch, you're looking at, with that change alone, just those two quick fixes with, like, say, a convenient breakfast, and then using leftovers for a meal the next day, you're looking at, maybe 100 to 120 grams of protein right there. You do that over a long period of time, you'd be surprised to see what happens.
Yeah. Absolutely. I know when my protein intake came up, even when I first started, I was my diet was healthy, right? But my protein intake wasn't crazy. Like, I would have egg whites in the morning, no cheese or anything like that, just egg whites and hot sauce. And then I would go for lunch, I would have a salad. And I thought, a salad, oh, it's healthy. I later did a little bit more research, and having ranch on your salad with croutons probably isn't the most nutritionally ergonomic thing to do for yourself, for lack of a better term. Not having any sort of protein source or anything like that on the salad wasn't a good thing for me. And then I would have chicken and rice for dinner, which was a good source of protein. Just like you said, though, even when I was in the process of losing weight, I mean, I think egg whites is probably a better, breakfast source than cereal or fruit when it comes to protein. But, you know, even I had to work my way into the knowledge of the fact that protein is good for you.
Yeah, and a lot of these potential clients I'm talking about, like, their goal is to lose body fat, but after they go through their diet and it's extremely deficient in protein, micronutrients, you know, cutting calories right from that, and this is where people go wrong all the time, where they can't sustain their progress, their long-term progress, and end up going back to where they were. You know, you're already consuming a malnourished diet, and if you restrict on top of that, you might make progress for the first couple weeks, but your body's going to fight back against you at some point. You're going to feel worse than you did. And then the thing with, we talked a little bit about metabolic adaptation in the last podcast, these different ways your body fights against you.
Yeah.
That will not only make it harder to make more progress in the future, but, when people kind of rebound back to where they started, it happens like twice as fast, because one, when you do that, when you restrict from an already kind of crash metabolism, malnourished diet, that kind of situation, it further slows your metabolism. And I just learned this in a nutrition course that I just finished up recently, is that while your body, so when you lose fat, you don't lose fat cells, your fat cells shrink. And something that happens when you start to get into a leaner state is that your body will actually increase the number of fat cells that it has. So what happens is, people, let's say this is a classic example. They run keto for 8 to 12 weeks, lose a ton of weight, right? But then they they come out of it very quick. They go back to eating like they did before. Now your body has double the number of fat cells to, increase their energy stores as you rapidly increase your calories back up. So and that happens while your metabolism stays at that lowered state from where you started. So now you have a higher body fat percentage with a slower metabolism, and then it gets harder and harder if you want to get back into it and try to make more progress. So you need to, before you try and go for fat loss, you need to make sure that your diet actually consists of the nutrients that it requires, because then it makes the process a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that I noticed as well, is when I started to eat better, not necessarily less, but better. I felt better in the gym. I felt better with running. I felt better with all that stuff because I felt more lively rather than just dragging myself out of bed and doing it. And while that, from a mental and discipline standpoint is good to still be able to do that and still be able to wake yourself up and get after it regardless of how you feel, and put, what you have to do above your feelings, which is important, not even just in fitness, but in life in general. It was nice to learn more about it, learn more about protein, more about my overall health, and adapt my diet to something that would be beneficial for me and actually give me energy and make me more lively in the gym, on my runs, and in my work life and in my social life and everything like that, than to just, deprive myself of all the nutrients that I actually really needed and would have helped me, progress myself further.
Yeah, exactly. And it's good to pay attention to those things, like how, not only how you're feeling during your training when you're, let's say, you start a diet or whatever. As long as you're still feeling good stress wise and everything else that you're doing outside of the gym, that's when you're probably in a good spot. So, if you have those mornings when you're just like, just not feeling it today, but like you're still getting good sleep, your digestion's still good, you're still killing it in all your other endeavors, whether it be work, relationships, you're probably in a good spot. You can just suck it up and keep going. But if all these other things start to be red flags, at all, like your quality of life in those areas start to decrease alongside, your workouts, it's probably a good sign that you need to pull back and sort of look at everything you're doing from a bird's eye view to see if what you're doing is actually beneficial.
Yeah, because what's the point of it being beneficial physically if it's not beneficial mentally and emotionally, and you're tearing everything down around you? I mean, I know personally there was a point in time where I was like that, and I feel like I had to be like that though to get to where I'm at right now. Not had to, but I wanted to, because I really, really wanted to lose this weight as fast as I did. And it got to a point where I wasn't really talking to any family or any friends. I had a few people that I would be in contact with, but other than that, I put all of my energy and all my focus into my journey, into what I wanted to accomplish. And I don't want to say I left a trail of destruction, but I definitely cut myself off in order to not leave a trail of destruction.
I see. Yeah, as long as that came from a place of you just being so driven that all those things occurred, then I would say you were still like, you were doing everything the way you were supposed to be as far as your nutrition and training setup goes. But if it's from a place where you're just like, I'm so stressed out that I can't do these other things, or these other things are just for some reason inconveniences to me, that's when it's kind of a red flag. So as long as it wasn't that type of scenario, then yeah, that those times are gonna happen that you just described, where it's kind of a product of you being so driven
Yeah.
that those things kind of, like, it's not had to happen, but it's no surprise that it did.
Yeah.
Especially when you're doing something as drastic as you did, like the change you made, and that on top of all the other things you did during that time, like starting your clothing brand, the podcast, all these other things. You only have so much time in the day, so much output that you can have, physically, socially, mentally, whatever. Some things got to give. There's trade-offs.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's no solutions, only trade-offs.
Yeah.
And that's how I
Absolutely.
look at training too, with the trade-offs. You got to
Yeah.
look at all these variables, and if you're gonna you to ramp up things in some areas, you need to bring other things down.
Yeah, in order to be efficient. And that's something that I wasn't at first. Not saying that it didn't work, because it worked, but I would walk those 8 to 10 miles, and looking back on it, I could have ran a little bit more than I walked. I could have jogged a little more than I did here and there, been more efficient with my time. But I feel like the walking part of it just kept me focused, because the lazy part of me was like, dude, you're just walking. Like, you're not
Yeah.
running. Like, you're
Yeah.
just, that's it. So it got me up, and it got me out of bed, and it got me outside.
Yeah. Like, you're going to have those days where, you don't feel the best. Sometimes it's a matter of just like, okay, let me just go to the gym. Let me just start with one exercise. If I truly do feel, if it's a off day, feel like crap, I do that exercise, and after I'm still like, oh, I want to go home, then just go home. It probably is a good sign that it's time to pull back a little bit. But oftentimes you get there, you start doing your thing, and then, you feel good and you carry on with your normal workout. Um, mental fatigue it's a thing, it's a real thing, but it's not the most predictable variable. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's funny. You saying that reminds me of when I was younger and I wouldn't want to go to school. And my mom would always go, just go for a little bit. And if you don't feel good by like 10 o'clock, I'll come pick you up. I'd be like, okay, like fine. At whatever age I was at, I was like, that sounds like a deal. I'll go for a little bit. And if I want to come home, she'll come get me. Well, by
She
the
was playing
time
you.
I was fully engaged, hanging out with my friends, talking to everyone, I was like, oh, the day's over. And I probably didn't even recognize that that was the deal that we made in the morning.
Yeah.
So it kind of ingrained a little bit of just get there. Once you get there, you'll be fine. But it's all about getting there. So shout out to my mom for that. But yeah, and thank you for bringing that up, because you just brought back a memory for me. And yeah, I appreciate that. So next, you wanted to get into some common myths and misconceptions when it comes to training in general. So what do you want to start with?
I guess one of the biggest ones that I still hear is like building muscle is all about high volume, lots of reps, shocking the
Yeah.
muscle. um, yeah, it's just, can you do it with a lot of volume? So, well, a lot of volume meaning a lot of working sets. So when you hear somebody say they do a 25, 30 set chest workout, can you build muscle doing that? Yeah, a lot of people have done it for a long period of time. Is it So one thing with that, I had mentioned trade-offs with training earlier. If I add a lot of working sets to a muscle because, say, I'm working to bring it up, whether or not that's the right thing to do, you can do that. Just know the trade-off is you're not going to be able to train close to local muscular failure, like I was talking about earlier, as a pretty big requirement if you're looking to maximize muscle growth. Because with a lot of sets comes a lot of fatigue from all the systems of your body. And it's going to prevent you from being able to train close to failure and recruit your largest muscle fibers and achieve high degrees of mechanical tension, which is needed for muscle growth. So I would argue, like, there's two types of people that do that. There's somebody who it can train very hard and does the whole time. But the thing is, that person probably could have stopped at 12 sets and probably achieve the same benefit that they did from doing the rest of the 12 or 13 to get to 25 by the end of the workout. That person is spending a lot more fatigue for not much more stimulus. So, and when you look at the course of a training cycle that's, say, 4 to 8 weeks, that's going to sandbag you towards the end of it, because towards the end, that's when training's supposed to be hardest. Because if you're progressively overloading over time, your training gets harder and harder and harder in order to get the stimulus that you need to build muscle. So that's one camp. And then there's the camp of, say, the beginner or intermediate that doesn't know how to efficiently, say we're talking about a chest workout, efficiently hit their chest with whatever exercises they choose, and they don't know how to push themselves close to failure. That person needs a lot of sets to do that. But the thing is, if they learn how to do that that's going to save them a lot more time. So if you have that person who's doing super high volume workouts, they could just learn to be more efficient with what they're doing and probably get what they need to get out of it in half the time. So I would say, yes, that works, but I would try and get to a place where you can do less and get just as much, if not more, and save more time. So, and then I said, quote unquote, shocking the muscle. Shocking the muscle is, well, it should just be progressively overloading over time. That's what shocking the muscle is. It's not going in and doing different exercises every time you go in. That's what is called novel stimulus in resistance training, and it is a thing and is very beneficial, but only more advanced people can take advantage of that. Because the thing with when you see strength gains over time, say you've never done back squats before. Those first 6 to 8 weeks where you're seeing the strength gains, those gains are largely due to neurological adaptation. And all that means is it's just you acquiring skills for the exercise, whether it be better technique, better mind-muscle connection, stuff like that. So it's not necessarily due to gain. In part it is, but not the majority of it, due to gains in muscular size and strength. Once you get those adaptations out of the way, that's when you're really in the groove. And week to week, the gains in strength you see, although they might be smaller, they're more so due to gains in size and strength of the muscle. So if you're going in the gym and doing a bunch of random exercises, new exercises each week, if you're not advanced and know how to do those exercises already and know how to do them effectively and efficiently, you are kind of sandbagging your progress and what you're looking to get out of it.
So would you say, like, if someone was doing cable flies, for example, if they wanted to shock their chest by doing dumbbell flies, well, if you don't have the proper form down with cable flies to begin with, it's going to be kind of hard for you to go over to dumbbell flies and get that, because that requires a lot more stability in your arms and shoulders.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Or are you saying completely different workouts?
No, that's a scenario where, well, no. So I'm saying different workouts. So you do cable flies one week, and the next week you go and you say, okay, I'm gonna do dumbbell flies today.
Yeah.
Somebody who's advanced and has done dumbbell flies in the past knows how to do them very well. That can work. You just need to make sure that you're matching the volume that you were doing with the last workout. So if you're doing 3 sets for cable flies, if you're going to do dumbbell flies, make sure that you're kind of getting around the same number there, because you don't want to go from doing 10 sets of chest one week and then next week doing 20, the week after that being, oh, now my chest is too fried, going back down to like 6 or 8. You're like, oh, I killed my chest like last week. That's way too inconsistent, and you can't actually measure what you're doing. And measurement is key when it comes to long-term progress.
Yeah. So specifically measurement, what are some different ways that you've seen people measure it? I know earlier you talked about a logbook, but are there any other ways where you've seen people measure their progress?
So like when I said that, I just mean, you could bring a physical logbook in with you. You can maybe use an Excel spreadsheet. Let's say maybe you're a beginner, you're just getting into the gym. Maybe just tracking the number of working sets you are doing per muscle group is good enough. And, you want to get experience with a bunch of different exercises. Just make sure that you're not, like I said, going in doing 10 sets of chest one week, next week doing 20. And as long as the exercises are kind of similar, like in a perfect world, I prefer taking 4 to 6 weeks, making sure all the exercises are the same week to week, and just building on top of them. But, let's say maybe I'm doing cable flies one week at one gym. Next week, for some reason, I'm at a different gym for the same workout. They don't have a cable stack, and I got to do dumbbell flies. That's the scenario where, yeah, it's fine to do that. Just make sure that you're not throwing more than one variable in, meaning don't go do dumbbell chest flies and then do, more reps, more sets than you were doing with the similar exercise in the cable flies the week before. make it similar. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're not robots here, but
Yeah.
you should have those variables kind of down pat, because when you make progress and you start seeing outcomes, you want to know what variable that's due to. You don't want to go change a bunch of different things, see progress, and you're like, oh shit, like what did I do that made that happen? You want to know what it's from.
Okay. Yeah. And I have a question for you. And I know I'm kind of springing this one on you because I know we didn't say we're going to talk about cold exposure and hypertrophy too much, but I actually had someone who listens to the show. They specifically asked me this question. They said, if they want to do cold exposure, right? Like that's something that they want to do to recover. Should they do it in the morning before they work out? Or no, I'm sorry, not in the morning, but should they do it before or after they work out? And if they want to do either of them, how many hours before and how many hours after, and which one is preferred?
So I don't think, for hypertrophy training, I don't think cold exposure should be used for recovery purposes outside of like nuanced reasons, such as I'm in a contest prep, and let's say I'm halfway through a training cycle and I'm really feeling shot and sore than I usually am, in a situation where, say, I hit chest Monday, I need to hit it Thursday again, but Wednesday comes around and I'm still pretty sore. The thing with a contest prep is I need to be able to train to retain the muscle mass in that calorie deficit. So that's the situation where I would use it, but that's like a 1% of the time. Like that's a 1% of the time scenario where I would use it for recovery purposes in hypertrophy training.
Yeah.
It's not like other sports where getting to the practice or getting to the game is the goal, regardless of soreness, aches, stuff like that. That's a scenario where you use cold exposure for recovery, because getting to that practice and game is the goal. With hypertrophy training, recovery is just as important as getting to the training session. So, because when you're recovering, that's when you make gains, and that gains is the goal. So the thing with cold exposure is, I said it in the last podcast, cold exposure decreases inflammation, and inflammation is needed for muscle recovery. By not abusing, but if you're using cold exposure on a regular basis, you're going to be kind of decreasing, blood flow and nourishment to that area that you damaged during the workout. So definitely not after the workout.
Okay.
Even then, if you're going to use it before the workout, there has been shown to be benefits as far as increased performance goes if you use cold exposure before, maybe like 2-3 hours before. But still, if you're using it every day, if you're using the cold exposure, then you're decreasing the recovery from the workout the day before. So I can't think of a scenario outside the one that I gave in contest prep where at that time actually getting to the resistance training session is the goal. Outside of that, I wouldn't use it for recovery purposes. I would use it for other reasons. I think a big benefit to using cold exposure is that dopamine hit you get from doing something that's hard. And that dopamine hit's different from others, such as, you get dopamine hits from consuming caffeine, drugs, stuff like that. The thing about those things is if you use them repeatedly over time, it increases your dopamine threshold, meaning you need more of that stuff to get the same dopamine hit and response that you want, that feel good feeling. It takes more of that to get that response. The thing with cold exposure, exercise, doing these things that are hard, getting those dopamine hits from that, those things keep your dopamine threshold, it doesn't increase it. And in fact, sometimes it might even lower it from where it's at. So you don't continuously need more to get that same desired outcome. So I use it for stuff. I use it for reasons outside of the gym. I use it to help myself perceive other life stressors as less stressful, because I'm doing something that's very hard that doesn't increase my dopamine threshold. So I know that was kind of long-winded, but if I had to give a black and white statement, which I hate doing, I hate black and white statements when it comes to training and nutrition.
Yeah.
I would say if you're using it for recovery purposes for hypertrophy training, I would say that it's not the best way to do it. And if you need something like that to recover for training sessions, I would say that you're not managing your volume properly. So if you are that person, say you overdid it on chest on Monday and you need to hit chest again Thursday, I would just kind of take that light day Thursday. Next week, when it comes back to Monday, your big chest day, I would just pull back the amount of working sets or the intensity, and then see how you feel on Wednesday of this week. So then, managing volume is actually how you manage your recovery. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It seems like managing your set volume is more important than your rep volume, just by the way you're explaining, like, no, it's like 20 to 25 sets, like working sets. So I always focused on reps. I don't know why. Well, just how I was brought up, focusing on reps. But I've come to find out that sets are very important as well, even though that's something that I never really took into consideration.
Yeah. So, and that's one I didn't even touch on that at the beginning, was rep ranges. So the thing is, hypertrophy training is great because it's not just this small rep range where you get hypertrophy. Like it's mainly thought of as this like 8 to 12 rep range between strength and muscular endurance where you magically build muscle. It's not the case. Sets between like 5 and 30 reps have been shown to have similar outcomes in hypertrophy. Like I said earlier, it really comes down to those effective reps per set. Those last 5 or 6 reps where the rep speed, the velocity really slows down. That's when your muscles are experiencing the highest degrees of force. So you can do that in a set of 5, or you can do it in a set of 20. It's just a matter of getting to those last 5 to 6 on the set of 20 that really matter. And whatever exercises you choose kind of dictates what rep range you use. Like, I'm not going to do a set of 5 on dumbbell side laterals. My shoulders would fall off my body. Yeah. So that's not as important. It's that getting close, that proximity to muscular failure, that really dictates the outcome.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Zach, it's been a pleasure having you on, man. Is there any last words or any last piece of advice you want to give our listeners?
Yeah, I just want to kind of rehash on what I mentioned earlier in the podcast about, there's many ways to design a program for building muscle, but just make sure that you have a rationale as to why everything is in place, why you're working out this many days per week, why you're doing this many exercises, why you're doing this many sets per exercise, why you have each exercise where it's at. Have some sort of rationale for everything. And tracking your progress diligently over time. And that's how you kind of know what variables are contributing to the outcomes that occur.
Awesome. Well, Zach, thank you very much for your time, man. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate all the information that you brought to viewers. For all of our viewers out there, thank you for listening. Follow us on Spotify and YouTube and TikTok, all at ExcelCast. On Instagram, we're ExcelCast_. Like, subscribe, follow. I'll be actually, Zach, you may like this. Instead of doing those 1-minute clips anymore, I'm going to be having like 5 to 7 minute, like longer clips so I can get a whole idea that you explained in a clip. That's something that I've been working on recently. Those are going to be mainly YouTube though. So I'm going to have a whole subsection of, like clip lists that people can actually go in and click on specific things that they want to learn about, specific things that they want to focus on with, whatever their journey may be. So I'm excited about that. I just made 2 today, and this is going to be one that I'm going to also go through and clip out a bunch of different videos. So I'm excited for that.
That's a good idea. Yeah, especially a lot of toxicity occurs from, well, at least what I see on like TikTok or Instagram reels, when like people will take like that 10-second clip from the 1-minute clip, and you go to the 1-minute clip, and it just doesn't represent at all what the person was trying to say, and then just gets a bunch of
No, yeah.
toxic conversation going about the post. So it's definitely long form content, definitely the way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to be able to offer that to people too, so they don't have to, listen to an entire hour to get exactly what they want. They can come in, kind of a cross between the goodness of a long form content and also getting what you came for, and specifically sectioning that out for the people. So yeah, I'm excited about that, and yeah, I'll be letting you know about those. I'll be sending you a couple too in the meantime. But for everyone out there, thank you for listening. Stay blessed and excel.